She was sent to reform a monster, a war hero who attacks like a wild dog. He almost destroyed her on the first day, and now he must meet the royal family. The food is poisoned, the mansion is a trap, and the guards are useless. If he snaps, there will be trouble. Subscribe now. It's the only thing that keeps me making these videos. Screams were coming from the magnificent mansion, and someone was smashing dishes. The frail girl tried to calm the raging man. He held her tightly against the wall. His eyes blazed with anger, as if he were ready to tear anyone to pieces. The girl's muscles went limp with fear. Every day was a struggle with this mad dog. The man looked directly into the girl's eyes. They were full of confidence and dominance. Finally, he gave up and bent over her, exhausted. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. This time, she had succeeded in calming him down. This time, the man calmed down for 10 seconds. This is a record. She asked him to let her go, but he did not respond, so she had to force him away from her. Instead, he began to look at her with puppy eyes. This meant that he wanted something, but could not say it. The man suddenly grabbed the girl and pulled her close, saying that he wanted her to be with him. The man won't speak unless she asks him to, and that's why they shouldn't get close. The girl was waiting for the moment when she could go out. Our hero clung to the girl again, hugging her tightly. At that moment, she began to remember why her life had become like this. All the trouble began when she was entrusted with this mission. She had been called by the most important saint of the temple, where she was serving. She was glad to meet him. The hierarchy in the temple, where she serves, is very simple. There are 7 sons of God who are in charge of the temple, but she is not in this hierarchy. She is just a nun. At that time, she thought that she was not worthy of performing this task. But then she realized that it was martyrdom. She had no rich parents, so she worked hard for 7 years. If she had refused the job at the time she was offered it, there would have been no problem. She was just unlucky to be born poor. That is why she was given this hard labor. She didn't know what was coming. Of course, at first she tried to resist. She rolled on the floor and threw tantrums, but then she realized that it was better to be quiet. She pretended to enjoy the work, but inside she was outraged. She was assigned to help a gentleman who had returned from the war to re-enter society. At that moment, she realized she was in trouble. She knew nothing about war or battles. She was afraid of blood. But in the temple, on the contrary, they thought that she was used to it because she had been to war. Only those who have been there know how war poisons a person. Church members treat soldiers until they are back in service. However, no one thinks about their mental health. There is a shortage of people in the hospital, so if they ask her to do this, it means the situation is critical. No one will help the girl, so if she fails, she will die ignominiously. Daelin asked what would happen if she died during the mission. She was told that in that case, God would give her bliss. What it really meant was, you die like you work. You're a slave anyway, so accept it. Daelin asked again, what would happen if she wanted to die? What was the point of all this? She hoped they would offer her something. The saint thought. The girl stood in silence, hoping that she would not have to do the work now. Meanwhile, the man smiled and said, you will never learn to be obedient. The girl was excited, wondering if she could be free. Would she be offered anything? They were not allowed to take money, so they would not offer her anything, and there was nothing else to offer, so she wouldn't get anything anyway. Daelin grew up in this temple, and as a child, she thought it was the way things were supposed to be. But when she grew up and went to the battlefield, her view of the world changed. She realized that if she continued to live the way she had been living, no one would appreciate her efforts. She was determined not to be anyone's submissive girl anymore. The head teacher said he had watched Daelin for a long time and knew what she was capable of. And he was sorry that her efforts were not being recognized, so he promised that if she took on the job, even the higher-ups would recognize her merits. Daelin blushed. Is she going to get a promotion? Will she get a place in the higher hierarchy? That would be something she would accept. Daelin said with a smile that she would follow orders wherever they sent her. She was anxious to get started and asked who needed saving. The man snapped his fingers, and guards appeared around him. He told them to follow the orders of the 2 guards, but Daelin thought the rush was strange. She was told that she would be sent to a war hero from the berserker unit. The girl was afraid because she knew that this man indiscriminately kills both enemies and friends. The man smiled slyly and said, I forgot to tell you, you have to work alone. Please go quickly. I hope to see you safe and sound. Now all the pieces in the girl's mind came together. Only now did she realize that she had been set up. And so it was that day Daelin was trapped. She had a problem waiting for her to solve. She was torn between emotions as she rode in the carriage. She had recently returned from the war, and now she was back in hell. She had seen a lot, so she had no tears left Even though she wanted to cry, she remembered how the 8th Division was created. Their country was losing the war. The morale of the troops was falling. The war dragged on until something happened. The berserker unit appeared. No one knew where they came from, but they had superpowers, and they constantly won battles and then disappeared without a trace. Their allies called them saviors, and their enemies called them demons. Daelin was very grateful to them because she wanted the war to end. But one day, everything changed. The berserkers began to attack even their own. They were called mad dogs. Thanks to them, the country won. The emperor's second son became a hero, and everyone forgot about the existence of the 8th Division. Everything was presented as the military success of the prince. As soon as the war was over, the unit dissolved, and everyone forgot about them. The emperor ordered the church to cure the heroes so that they could be honored by the nobility. It takes 10 guards to restrain even one, but Daelin had already promised to do this work, and she had nowhere to go. A man named Lauren rode with her in the carriage, the third son of the House of Truck. He thanked the girl for taking the job and said they were almost there. The girl replied that she always follows the will of God. Lauren didn't get to fulfill his potential in the war, so now he's working on the 8th Division. Daelin said she would try to do her best. Lauren replied that it would be difficult for her to do so, as she would be alone. He gave her a whistle and told her to carry it with her at all times. This is one of the safety rules. It should be used in case of danger. The whistle was developed to calm down frantic heroes. Now, Daelin understood how they could calm them down. She thanked them for the gift. The time passed quickly, and they arrived at the place. Soon, Daelin would live in this mansion. She looked around and clutched the whistle tightly in her hand. There are always guards at the mansion, but the cleaners will come once a week, and the food will be delivered every other day. She had been told to shout to the guards if anything happened, but she didn't think that would help her. She nervously asked if she could also leave the estate at night. She received a sarcastic reply that this was not possible. The staff immediately came to Daelin and helped her carry her bags. They opened the door to the mansion, but sent her inside alone, telling her that the soldier was at the end of the corridor. The girl's body shivered. She looked around and saw the magnificent interior of the palace. She thought that the beast would attack her at once, but she did not see anyone. Moreover, the mansion seemed to grow larger with every step she took. At last, she reached her room and cautiously entered it. A smile immediately appeared on her face. She saw that the room was beautifully clean and luxurious. Before, she had been living in a small room that looked like a coffin. She had thought she would live with a mad dog, but so far it was very luxurious. She immediately imagined herself as the owner of the estate, how the servants worshipped her as she walked down the corridors. Daelin imagined what she would know, and everyone around her applauding her appearance in public. Suddenly, she saw a dirty man in a dark corner in the midst of luxury. The beast saw her and looked toward her. Daelin's body felt tingling. She immediately calmed down and became very concentrated. When you meet a beast, you should not show fear. She took hold of the whistle and said, "Greetings, lost soul." The dog became angry and growled. Daelin could immediately see that he was not happy to see her. She tried to take a step forward, but stepped on the dog's tracks. This unpleasant sound was a trigger for the dog. Daelin could not understand whether the man was intelligent, because if he attacked her, she would die. After a while, the man stopped roaring. The girl decided that she should try to talk to him to see if he was sane. But as soon as she tried to introduce herself to him, he attacked her like a dog. At that moment, Daelin realized that she had miscalculated. She thought that no matter what, he was still human. She thought that she could talk to him like a normal person. She came to her senses and blew the whistle. As she waited for the inevitable death, she realized that she was still alive. When she opened her eyes, she saw the man fall to the floor and curl up. He was lying there with his eyes closed, and he did not even seem to be breathing. The girl was frightened when she saw the result of the whistle. She ran to her husband to see if he was all right. Suddenly, she jumped away from him, screaming that this was no way to behave toward a man who had just almost killed her. Daelin stood and watched the man for a while. He continued to lie there without any signs of life. Finally, she decided to approach him again, cautiously. Her mind was still racing with the thought that he was pretending to be dead to attack her again. But she tried to bring him back to life anyway. As she looked closer, she noticed something strange. There were bruises from the rope right around his neck, but they had not been there before. The girl was frightened and assumed it was the whistle, and it was strange because there was nothing unusual about it. This situation frightened Daelin, and she decided not to use the whistle if possible. And then she tried to pick up and move the body to the bed, but it was heavy. Daelin noticed a strange thing. His body seemed to be floating above the ground. She wondered if it was because of the muscles. Suddenly, the man began to snore. The girl breathed out a sigh of relief. If he snores, he is alive. She looked closely and saw a fresh wound on his body. She climbed on top of him and tore his shirt with all her strength. She was astonished at what she saw. Is it a killing machine or a chopping board? There was not a living thing on it. She put her gentle hands on his rough body and began to heal him with magic. She hoped it would remain a secret between them. Even as a child, she had noticed that her gift was special. She realized that no one could protect her in case of emergency, so she hid it from everyone. It would take half a day for an ordinary minister to heal these wounds, but she could do it in a minute. After the man's wounds were healed, the girl wanted something sweet. For a moment, Daelin wondered what the man usually ate. She hoped it wasn't raw meat. But just as she was about to go in search of food, the man's eyes opened. There was an awkward pause between them. Then the man suddenly rose up and threw the girl off him. She fell and hit her head, and blood began to spurt from her nose. For a moment, she thought she was going to die in such a stupid way, but she was lucky again. She regained consciousness and cleaned herself up, and then she began to shout at her husband that she had only wanted to help him and had not done anything wrong to him, but the man calmly turned his eyes away from her, as if he did not want to see her. Daelin was glad that he had regained his senses and was feeling ashamed, but the treatment was not yet complete, so she crawled back to the man. She continued to heal him with her magic. At last, he was at peace. She thought that the dog was probably just overstimulated when he heard her footsteps. Daelin was sure that with her power, she could calm him down. She asked him if he could tolerate her voice. The man replied that he could. She was glad that the dog could tolerate her. She asked him his name. He replied, Kels. Daelin thought that was a nice name, but when she asked who named him, he could not remember. She asked him if he often lost his temper, but Kelsey did not understand the question. Suddenly, her stomach began to growl with hunger. This sound made Kelsey angry again. Daelin realized that she was going to get into trouble again. She stood up and said she was going to get some food to settle her stomach. She offered to bring him some food so they could eat together. The man agreed. The girl thought about it. I wonder if he can only answer yes or no. She asked him to wait on the couch and heard the same answer again. The girl breathed a sigh of relief, for Kels did everything he was told. He would be easier than she thought. As Daelin stepped out into the hallway, a delicious aroma caught her eye. She quickly ran toward it. At this point, she did not know what was coming. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a blonde, mysterious woman was sitting. She was asking her son if the nun had arrived in Kels. The boy answered in the affirmative and added that he was waiting to see the girl. Then the woman looked out the window and said that Kelsa would be made into a wonderful man. Meanwhile, Daelin brought Kels a steak, but he got angry and threw the steak and the plate on the floor. He could not control himself because of the great anger that surrounded him. His mouth began to bleed, and Daelin rushed to help him. She used her magic again, hoping that his pain would soon pass. Suddenly, the girl felt better. It was not blood, but only juice. And Kels' seizure was not anger. He simply choked on his food. The girl laughed and apologized for her behavior. She was simply frightened by what she saw and wanted to help, but Kels was not going to let it go. He grabbed the girl by the shoulders. At that moment, she thought she was going to die this time. She began to pray out of fear, but the man simply said one word in a cold tone, poison. This confused Daelin. Then Kels spat out the rest of the liquid from his mouth. He wiped it away and repeated that the food was poison. But fortunately, it did not seem to work. Daelin was amazed at his ability to recognize poison by taste. On the other hand, she was glad that she had not eaten any of it. Then Kels moved on to the next dish. After he had finished each course, he said that Daelin could finish it, but the food no longer looked appetizing. She was also afraid of the fact that danger was waiting for her at every turn. She exhaled loudly and hoped that she would feel better after sleeping. She looked at Kels again and said she had something she wanted to show him. She asked him to wait a moment and then ran out of the room, leaving the man sitting on the cold floor. Kels didn't like what the girl was up to. Daelin asked for a tray of vegetables and tried to drag it into the room. She was sure they were not poisonous. Meanwhile, the servant just watched. He said he had reported it to Lord Loren and he would be here soon. Daelin thanked him and hoped that by then, she would be able to accomplish her plan. She thought about making her own food, but the last time she had done so was when she was a child. The only thing she knew about cooking was that she had to wash the vegetables and stir the soup from time to time. She hoped it would work. All she had to do was chop the vegetables. She set about cooking with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Lord Loren was running toward the mansion. He burst into Daelin's room and was frightened. Then he cried out loudly, "What has happened? Has he killed you? Is someone on the verge of death?" He didn't escape, did he? Daelin hurried to cover his mouth so that he would not provoke the rabid dog with his screams. In fact, she was surprised that Loren had come so quickly. Just as she was about to explain why she had called the Lord, she was distracted by the smell of burning. The chicken she was frying began to burn. Loren thought the girl was into curses because what she was cooking didn't look like dinner. Daelin replied that it was better than eating poison. Loren was surprised. It was the first time he had ever heard of such a thing. Then, Daelin told him that she had tried to make the food with the ingredients on the estate. She made soup and brought it to Kels. Daelin hoped he had not become more fierce because of the hunger. She was sure that her soup was safe and that her husband would like it. But he just stood there silently looking at her. Daelin recognized the features of a nobleman in his posture. Kels could make his debut as a young gentleman very soon if he learned to control his anger. At this point, the man took a candlestick and threw it at a passing pigeon. The bird fell to the ground with him. The man turned his head, looked at the girl, and said that it was his food. The girl was astonished at what she saw. That is why she cooked it in a frying pan. Loren asked if everything was going according to plan, and he asked if she could make Kelsey into a noble gentleman. But the girl thought that this question was inappropriate and pointed it out to the Lord. Suddenly, the man spoke of the arrival of important guests. As it turned out, the imperial family was coming very soon. Lady Charlotte and Prince Sebian will be here in a few days. They were anxious to meet Kels. This moment was a lifetime in the making. The emperor had 2 wives, the first dead and the second not to his taste. But then the charming Charlotte appeared, and he felt sincere feelings for her. Everyone called her the third empress and took care of her. They were a wonderful family, and they looked so happy. However, they should have foreseen that the little child would want to meet them. When he stretched out his hand, the wild dog would probably bite it off. The girl tried to understand how the imperial family had thought of this. She was also afraid that Kels would kill them, and she would be punished. Daelin explained that they would be fully prepared and with a guard. This helped her to calm down and breathe, but not for long, because suddenly the food began to burn. "You should have cooked here yourself, for all the food in the mansion is poisonous." It turned out that this happens quite often and is not uncommon. Daelin now had a new responsibility to prepare fresh food. They will bring in food from which she has to make something delicious. Loren grabbed the bowl, thinking it was a demon. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it was only soup that she wanted to feed to Kels. She tried to explain that it might not taste so bad, but Loren shouted that the soup tasted no better than poison. Suddenly, they remembered that they still had some burnt chicken. Loren promised to bring a cookbook and new food next time. Suddenly, their pleasant conversation was interrupted by a smashing door. It was Kels, and he was very angry and dangerous. He was eager to get the food, and nothing could stop him. Well, they had no choice but to give him soup and a burnt chicken. At first, he looked at the substance aggressively for a long time, but before he took hold of it with his hands, he hesitated a little. With a wave of his hand, he swallowed all that food, which could hardly be called food. At first, I was afraid that he might get angry because of the terrible taste. Daelin asked him if the soup tasted good. The man chewed for a few minutes, as if to keep the intrigue alive before he made his verdict. Then he asked for more, as if it was something incredible. He was probably so hungry that he didn't care what he ate. Loren folded his arms and thanked the Lord for taking care of Daelin. Then he went back to Kels, for the man knew how to recognize poison. Konyea said, "The herb charana is in the acid of anda. It was in the food." The girl was very surprised, for she realized that her husband had been taught this. Loren said that Kelsey had also been used as a spell. All invisible powers are considered sacred and controlled by the church, but not by military priests. If you think about it, the church used spells to turn children into weapons. She asked Loren, but he chose not to answer, hinting that Daelin was right. Before she knew it, Kels had taken the kettle out of her hands. He started eating quickly, so she decided to ignore his anger. Daelin made up her mind that she didn't want to know anything about spells. She was a good girl who lived a very ordinary life. Loren said that there were no losers among Kels's friends, not one. It was easier to start a man than to re-educate him, and there were many ways to do it. The realization of what could have been happening to this man was killing me. He could have seen so many deaths of his loved ones. No wonder he was so aggressive. Evening came, and the girl returned to her room. Daelin was very tired, and she was thinking about the events of the day. She decided to taste her soup, which tasted like poison. She decided to just run away and not eat anymore. To be fair, though, the bed here was excellent. Kels seemed fine, so it was time to go to sleep and take care of himself. The blanket was so soft and comfortable, and the pillow and mattress were silky. She might not be able to eat, but she could certainly sleep. Daelin believed she was safe because she had locked the door. But as it turned out, the lock wasn't the problem. and Kels burst in the middle of the night. He was very angry, and she couldn't understand what was wrong. Daelin took a whistle to keep herself safe. Realizing where this might lead made Kels calm down. She was glad to have some power over him. Now she had to find out why the man was awake. He was silent for a long time and then said, loudly. It took Daelin a few minutes to realize what he meant. And then Kels added, loud, can't sleep, footsteps, breathing, voice. She promised to be quieter, as she had never slept on a bed like this before. Suddenly, she realized that she was on the other side of the mansion. Kels was too sensitive to hear her footsteps even from that distance. It seemed that there were consequences of the spells, and they had to do something about it. It looks like he won't be able to go back to his room because he won't be able to sleep. The girl's words were confirmed by his tired and angry look. If they could not sleep, perhaps they could talk? The girl asked Kelsa to sit down while she made him some tea. He approached the small chair hesitantly. Daelin watched him and was surprised at how straight his posture was. She had some tea left over and offered it to him, but it was cold, so she used magic to warm it up. Kels was surprised to see such familiar magic in the hands of such a frail woman. At first, he thought she was a war priest, but he was wrong. There are several types of priests. The most ordinary ones study and then work, while others are born with this power. And then there are the warrior priests, who have divine powers such as healing or even fire and help on the battlefield. She asked to keep it a secret, but she hoped Kels understood. Suddenly, the man began to drink the tea with a gulp, and Daelin screamed. Kelsey said, "It's hot." Of course it is. She had just boiled the water. The girl began to explain that the taste was to be enjoyed. First pour the tea, let it cool down, and then drink it. Daelin was a maidservant until she discovered her divine power. This did not help her much in her life, only increased her workload. Come to think of it, Kels. He went through so much suffering, but he remained very attractive. She punished herself for these thoughts because she could not understand what was wrong. To distract her husband, she decided to light a candle because it was very dark. Perhaps she shouldn't have done that, but Kels seemed to be resigned to it. They continued talking, the man looking more or less relaxed. He was relieved, and the girl was glad to hear it. It seemed as if they were making progress and really learning something. Daelin decided to ask if the man could hear anything else besides her breathing. As it turned out, absolutely everything from crows and a few mice to the changing of the guard. It was impossible to imagine such a thing. It would drive you crazy. Well, at least now it was clear why he was so angry. Although the idea of covering his ears with cloth or sticks also came to mind. First, she tried it with her hands to see if it would work, but Kels didn't seem to be too keen on the idea. The man quickly made it clear that this crazy idea was just plain awful. The girl tried to keep positive and come up with a plan. But looking at this exhausted boy, she felt pain in her bones. Now it was time to start a conversation to distract him. They talked for quite a while until the man returned to his room. The next morning, Daelin woke up very tired. She wanted to believe that she had fallen asleep soundly if she hadn't been awake, but she could not sleep at all. It was impossible to sit and know that someone was listening to your every breath. At first, she was worried about being poisoned, but now she has to worry about not breathing loudly. All the while, she shouted her dissatisfaction until she realized she was saying it out loud. I should have just gone and made breakfast. Then suddenly, she heard a voice outside the windows. It was probably the boys who had brought the food, but they were being too loud. They discussed who could live in this huge estate. They had to think of something quickly before they woke Kels. It looked like they had already done that, because she saw him in the tree. His dark silhouette was already looming over their souls, ready to pounce. Suddenly, at a time when they were not expecting it, he jumped out. These fools seemed to have ignored everything their employer had told them. The question of the year, will these two survive? Probably not. Although even if they do, their security will need to be removed. Well, when the guy jumped out from behind the tree, the world stopped. Daelin jumped out the window right at him to stop the killing. It wasn't until she was flying that she realized she'd leaned out the window. She could have just blown the whistle in her room. The thought came to her too late, as she was flying fast to the ground. The last thing she saw was Kels's excited expression. He had never looked like that before. A moment later, they both fell to the floor, and everything around them seemed to collapse again. The men started screaming as Daelin jumped out of the window to stop Kelsey. The girl was furious. Not only had she saved a life, but she had been the last one to do so. She'd never wanted to kill someone like she wanted to kill those two assholes. The men said that it was their job to deliver the food to the pity. Daelin shouted at them to drop the boxes and run from the godforsaken place. When they saw the two angry dogs, the food couriers decided to really run away. In truth, they would have preferred never to return. Although the pay was good, life is more valuable than money. Well, Daelin was left alone with Kels and the box of food. That was one less thing to worry about. Now she had to cook something. Suddenly, Daelin realized that she had been screaming very loudly. So it wasn't Kelsa who came back to ask how he was feeling. She wanted to thank him for saving her, but he didn't seem to care. This mountain of muscle was so strong that it could break all the trees in the forest with its bare hands. Suddenly, she began to watch him more closely. Something had changed. He seemed to be very scared and excited instead of angry. Daelin realized that this was a chance to get through to the gentleman. So she began to speak in a gentle voice, as if she were talking to a cat. "It's all right, we're safe. We've just got some food." Kels began to calm down, so the words were helping him as well. Kels was a man with very intense feelings. He would have been dead on the battlefield if he hadn't reacted aggressively to strangers. He still has a fear of death, like a programmed chip. Daelin's job is to teach him how to live in peacetime. She tried to praise him and treat him as a human being. Suddenly, she noticed the two guards, who were apparently sleeping soundly. Daelin could hardly stop herself from yelling at them, so she asked them, "Did you sleep well, guards?" It must have been a hard shift. This was her way of saying that the boys should be guarding the mansion, not sleeping. Daelin asked Kels to lie down on the bed, but then she took him to bed herself. It turned out that he hadn't even been taught how to do the most basic things. Luckily, the man had no trouble getting on the bed and waiting. Daelin had planned a day of treatment, so she began to explain to him the gestures to turn over on his back. Kels said, "Uncomfortable." "Of course it is. Maybe you need to turn your head." The girl helped him to turn his head. It seems to be better. But he was still uncomfortable. What a disaster. Daelin realized that Kels wasn't used to a soft bed, so the floor was more comfortable. She began to explain that he needed to relax and feel. Only when he was completely relaxed did he try to calm himself down. The girl thought that Kels was not answering the difficult questions, and she had to solve it. What does it mean to be a young gentleman? All aristocrats are rude and ill-mannered. At least that's what Daelin had seen. She wanted to believe that she didn't have to create another rude aristocrat. Anyway, there was still a lot of work to be done. She used her magic to ease the pain. It was a good time to talk to the boy. By talking, she made him fall asleep, and then it began. The chaos in the kitchen was all her own, so Daelin started the show. It takes more food to feed a Kelsey than 10 shelters don't cook. After a while, Kelso came in, looking like he'd had a good night's sleep. Daelin wanted to check something with him. She wanted to see if there were any poisons in the food that she shouldn't eat. It's a shame to use it like this, but it's a safety precaution. First, the carrots. They had no poison in them, and neither did the onions. After checking the food, she decided to unpack the books. Lauren had brought some interesting recipes, so Daelin began to read. She opened the book with excitement, but she couldn't read anything. After a moment, she closed the book, hoping she hadn't forgotten how to read. And then she cried out, "I can read, but I don't understand anything." The girl suddenly remembered Kels, and he must have been curious, so she held the book up to his face so that he could see it. The boy smelled the book and thought for a few seconds, and then he said, "There is no poison." Clearly, he was doing his job. The girl asked the boy to look at the contents of the book, but from the way Kels was acting, Daelin was in complete despair. "He didn't seem to know how to read, so I'll have to teach him that too." Kelso said, "Not necessary for combat. Reading is necessary everywhere." Daelin said she would introduce reading lessons into their day, but the boy was very surprised. He didn't seem to know what it was. Daelin asked, "Do you not want to?" but got no answer. Kels didn't seem to know what he wanted or didn't want. "I should have taught him to sleep on the bed, to read, and to recognize what he liked. But first, lunch. It's much more important." The recipe says, cut the carrots and onions into small pieces. Kels knew how to do that, and Daelin immediately thought they were cutting them into small pieces. There aren't many things on the battlefield that you can use for that. Daelin said, "Do you want to try cooking?" The man quickly took up the knife. My God, it was worse than a horror movie. Daelin had forgotten that the man was a living weapon. "I didn't care about the vegetables. I had to run now." The vegetables must have felt afraid too when they saw who was holding the knife. The man started cutting the vegetables into small pieces. His skill was certainly impressive, but there was one thing. Obviously, not everyone could cut vegetables into such small pieces. Kels said, "It's done!" and she snapped out of her thoughts. She thanked the show sarcastically and decided to check the vegetables. Well, it wasn't vegetables anymore. It was mashed potatoes. Daelin was upset because the recipe didn't say so. Kels said he used to use these skills on prisoners. At first, she was happy that he had said a complete sentence, but then she was upset. Well, the girl gave them a little farewell ceremony where all the vegetables could say goodbye. Then, it was time to cut up the meat, and that was Kels's job as well. Daelin prayed that she would survive the day. Fortunately, they finished quickly and went to look at their lunch. The soup was quite good, and it must have tasted good. It turned out that it takes a lot of time and energy in the kitchen. It's exhausting. Daelin said, "Mr. Kels, what do you think of the cooking?" The man replied that it was not difficult, which is good, but I should have asked if he was having fun. Kels obviously didn't know the meaning of the word fun, so I should explain that. The girl asked if Kelsey wanted to do it again, but the man said, "Do you want more?" Clearly he was not enjoying it, so we should have given him a break. Daelin was motivated to learn to cook better. Kels said, "I want to. I'll help. I'll cook." She was happy to hear that, so she said they would do it tomorrow. The two of them began to grow closer together, and Kelsey was able to do many activities. The stew they made together was delicious, really delicious. Daelin asked Kels what he liked. For example, he liked spinach and carrots. Then she asked, "What about me?" Kels replied, "I don't like it," which was really rude, but expected. The man answered quickly and sincerely, which was pleasing. But why didn't Kelsey like Daelin? She seemed like a nice girl. It was her sensitivity. Kels called her loud and unruly, but the girl wasn't really surprised. She had been close to death several times because of sleep apnea. But how else can she sleep? It is simply unbearable. Even though Daelin is trying very hard, Kels still thinks she's loud. Even though the boy is a quick study, he should have thought of something for sensitivity. Daelin's medication has reduced his sensitivity, and Kels is sleeping better at night. But he won't be able to keep up with his grades, and that's a problem. The girl has been trying to make friends with Kelsey for a long time, but to no avail. The man seemed to avoid getting close to her, even when Daelin thought they were friends. Kels hated animals, whether birds or fish, even cats and dogs. He didn't know the word friendship or love. He was a weapon. This is going to be long, but who says Daelin isn't persistent? She kept fighting for his favor, because without her, she couldn't make him a status aristocrat. Restlessly, leaves from the trees began to fly into the room. One of them fell near the boy, and he was surprised. Daelin explained what it was, but Kels didn't need an explanation. He thought everything was hostile, angry, and threatening. Konyea looked at the offended Daelin, who had been sitting there for a long time. Even though she was trying to make something up, it was offensive to hear her being loud. His heart began to race, and even Daelin could hear it. She had told her several times what to do in such situations. Deep breaths helped to calm him down, and Kels was changing. Daelin praised his efforts. Kels thought about how loud Daelin was always, but only with her did he feel what he could not call irritation. It's different from war and anything else related to it. It is an easy peace. One does not have to run away from these sounds. They mean safety. They mean that everything is fine now. Calmness at last. Kels knew the feeling. He had suffered so much in the war, but not anymore. He liked it. He liked the peace with Daelin. He liked her. Meanwhile, the girl was like a volcano erupting. For about an hour, she sat on her knees, trying not to breathe. She wanted to be a helper, but she became a slave. It was worthwhile to teach this wicked girl a little independence. She is the daughter of a baron. Why should she be afraid to serve anyone? Besides, Kels is not even a nobleman, so what status does he have? She was crushed, exhausted, and very exhausted. Daelin shouted, "I'm a noblewoman, so I don't have to speak with respect to you." Kels looked at the girl in a strange way. He nodded his head, as if to agree with her and give her permission. The girl was very happy about this, but she realized that she did not know how to speak to Kelso informally. It was awkward and strange, and it was infuriating. She had to figure out how to address him. He wasn't Mr. Kels anymore. Well, Daelin settled on just Kels. She shouted out Kelsey happily, expecting some kind of reaction or support, but he grimaced as if in disgust. He didn't like it. This man was really very strange. A few hours later, Daelin was picking up the groceries for breakfast. The guards asked if Kels was all right. He looked exhausted. These people thought that Kels was a noble lord, just sick. Well, at least to someone in this world, he will be a noble lord. Daelin had shown her strength, so the guards asked for a blessing. A blessing is like touching God and feeling omnipotent. But in reality, it gives nothing but a feeling of omnipotence. Yet people dream of touching divine power. Daelin had a lot of that power, and the favor of the guards would be nice. But still, if people wanted it, why not pay for it? She asked for 20 silver coins for the blessing. The basis of religion is faith. The more Daelin presses, the more they believe. She said, "This power has been entrusted to me by the Lord himself." Daelin also said the money would go to charity. The guards believed more and more. Complete idiots, although it sounded convincing. By the way, a priest has a lot of work, and the salary is always low. Despite the fact that people dream of their power, it is cheap. Daelin has taken very little, and some people take 100 pieces of silver. The girl made a discount of 10 coins, and the guards were happy. The men felt powerful, and went out to improve their lives. That is the purpose of power, is it not? Daelin was happy to give them a little bit of encouragement and motivation. She said good day and turned to Kels. The girl had risked her life on this estate, and she deserved to be thanked. Yesterday, she almost died again because of a fool. It all started when Daelin wanted to socialize informally. It annoyed Kels, but he handled it very well. There was an awkward pause between them, the worst possible moment to get close. Kels repeated his name several times, wondering what his name was. He asked me to call him that again, Kels, and then several more times. Daelin realized that he was okay with it, but obviously had mixed feelings. The boy got out of bed without saying anything. Daelin wanted to be worried, but Kels just sat down on the floor. Well, she seemed to be getting along with him. They've started an informal conversation, which is great. The girl continued to sing over and over again, and Kels listened. She tried not to laugh, for she was afraid it would make him angry, but the boy looked too funny, so Daelin couldn't help but laugh. Vora laughed out loud and said that Kels looked like a cat playing. When she realized what she had said, she felt ashamed. Perhaps it would have been better to keep quiet to avoid getting nervous. Suddenly, Kels turned into a gentle cat. He asked Daelin to say it again and again. The girl started, "One more time?" "Okay, Kels." But it wasn't the same. He liked the laugh, Daelin's bubbly laugh. He wanted to hear it again, so he said it again. It's not easy to be a cheerful girl under such pressure. The fake laughter seemed to irritate Kels. She explained that no one laughs in private. She also said that Kelso should learn to laugh too. It was a hard choice, either to laugh or not to lose the ability to kill people. It was hard for him. Kels had never laughed in his life. Daelin didn't know where to start. How could anyone even learn to do that? But she could use some motivation, so she encouraged Kelsey. Kelsey raised his hands like Daelin and began to say, "Hooray! Hooray!" They looked like a real team, and it was kind of fun. It shouldn't be too hard to teach Kels to laugh, but considering what he's been through, will he be able to live in society? Well, Daelin's task is only to make his debut successful, and then it doesn't matter. The girl has abdicated responsibility for his future life. She began to concentrate on what was not going to happen at the debut. The girl came into the room to remind him of his training, but Kels grabbed her and carried her to the balcony. He said, "There's a man there!" And then they both fell to the ground. Lauren, whom Kels did not recognize at first, was standing downstairs. He was also very panicked and trying to get away. He fell to the ground and looked very scared. Daelin realized that he was trying to be pitiful, but why? Well, Lauren wanted to attract attention and make himself look defenseless so he wouldn't be killed. Kels was furious, but Daelin repeated phrases to calm him down. She explained that it was Lauren and that he came by quite often. Kelsey took deep breaths in and out as Daelin suggested. Lauren was absolutely delighted with how cute they were. She explained that she should have at least given them a heads up. But Lauren explained that Kels had an incredible sense of smell and should have smelled him at the gate. Well, the beast calmed down, and Loren praised the girl for her efforts. She was happy that someone thought her work was excellent, but she was also sad because you can't put praise on bread. She shouted that her efforts could not be replaced, and that she was the only one who could do it. Lauren hinted that he had not forgotten the generous reward. Then she replied, "I was following God's will." Ironic, isn't it? Lauren came in too early, and Daelin decided to ask about it. He held out the book, Etiquette Lessons for an Audience with the Imperial Family. Damn it, Daelin wanted to burn the book. The title was definitely not good. Lauren tried to explain that this was a celebration for everyone and an incredible opportunity. He also said that his family would be arriving tomorrow morning. It was a huge blow to her self-esteem, and Daelin was furious. Who gives you a warning like that a few hours before a visit? She was worried and arguing with herself. She could have used some support, but Lauren wasn't a very good therapist. Kels could have been executed if the Imperial family didn't like him, so it was Daelin's job to make sure that didn't happen. Kels was not afraid of this. He had to be taught so much. She didn't know how to explain to him that he had to save his life, so she decided to give him an example. Everyone has one life to cherish, and Khalsa must cherish it also. It was too obvious, but no one had ever said it to him before. It was too cruel to raise him like that. Konya seemed to be beginning to understand, but he was still very far away. I should have concentrated on making my debut in front of the Imperial family. They had a very important mission to accomplish, and it was urgent. A very mysterious mission that only the two of them knew about. Daelin asked me to keep it a secret. We couldn't let anyone know. It was a general cleaning mission. We had to clean this house before the whole world saw it. They divided the duties into floors and went to work. It wasn't really their job. Lauren had promised to hire people. But all the workers were afraid of Kels and ran away from the house. So the girl had to do everything herself. The entrance had to be cleaned very well, because the imperial family would be there. Daelin cleaned quietly, and she was not in a great hurry. There was something magical about it. So calm and uninformed, the dust flew in all directions, and the girl gathered it up. The corridors were noticeably changing and becoming cleaner. The situation was terrible because the whole mansion had to be cleaned, but there was no choice, and we had to work. The girl began to show signs of strength, and she became even stronger. She felt as if she did not deserve it. Fear often took over parts of the body, but laughter helped. Suddenly, she wondered if Kels knew how to clean. She quickly threw down her tools and ran. My God, I should have left the mansion to that beast. It was crazy. Daelin was terrified that he might tear up the wallpaper or something worse. She ran into the part of the house where Kels was supposed to be cleaning. The bright light almost blinded her, so she covered herself. Apparently, the boy was too good at cleaning. Daelin asked him to stop and wanted to talk to him. It was just for show, maximum visual impact with minimum force. They had a new mission, not to use up all their strength. Kels gave the example of the war, and Daelin hesitantly agreed. But what they were doing could be called a battle with dust. They had to kill all the dust in the house and remain unharmed. Then came day 10, the arrival of the imperial family. Daelin looked a little damaged, and a few scars on her face were visible. Thanks to Kels's strength, they were able to clean the house quickly. If he had cleaned houses professionally, he would have been successful. But this was no time to relax. They had work to do. There was another mission to be accomplished. Now it was time to study. Daelin tried to teach the boy some etiquette. Fortunately, she knew a lot and could explain a lot. She even won first place for her knowledge of etiquette. Even the ordinary maidservants were also taught etiquette. Daelin was a gifted girl, and this played to her advantage. Now she had to get them to stop introducing themselves. Straight back, shoulders back, and a nod of the head. The man did everything perfectly. He looked like a true aristocrat. He looked like an angel, and his light even blinded Daelin. A golden light, the light of veteran priests. Kels was more skilled than Daelin, and it was insulting. Well, it was too easy for him. The charisma was hard to resist, but the girl had to teach him. She taught him for several more hours, and Kels was absorbing the information very well. Thanks to this, they finished quickly and were ready to receive their guests. But there was one important thing. The boy was very sensitive, so he reacted to every noise. The girl always calmed him down and told him that they were not guests. 98% of the creatures in this estate were animals, so they were irritants. Things were much calmer inside the mansion, but outside, Kels was overreacting. He is sensitive even to the wind, a crazy animal. It was very difficult to teach him not to react to stimuli. It was impossible to reduce his sensitivity in a short time. Daelin was exhausted and very frustrated at her failure. She could prove that she had tried, though, because Kels had changed. The girl's plan was to make him feel sorry for her. Empress Charlotte must have had a goal, so she could help Daelin. If they both prove useful, they will be rewarded. Well, a few minutes later, the guests arrived. The girl asked the boy to move to a safe distance. Daelin considered Charlotte to be a backup source of money. It was hard to deny that she was incredibly beautiful. Whatever she was to Daelin, she was an honor to meet. The girl bowed, and Kels followed suit. Daelin introduced them both, as was the custom. Obviously, everyone noticed her bruises and asked about them. This was to her advantage, and she was slightly pleased. The next moment, she made a martyr's face and almost began to cry. Daelin was following God's will, but she had entered a thorny path. Charlotte was very much moved by her speech. Then she turned to her son, Sebian, who was a dear boy. Sebian was the third king, but he looked quite old. In fact, Charlotte looked very young, so they were often mistaken for brother and sister. Sebian had precious eyes, the kind that shimmer with color in the sun. The boy asked for Kels, who was far away. Daelin explained that he was sensitive. She also added that his ears could explode, but she meant something else. The boy was disappointed, but understood. Daelin wanted to show off the mansion, and the guests loved the idea. So far, everything had gone smoothly. Now, we just need to follow the agreed-upon route, but she did not know that things would not go as she expected. An arrow flew over the prince's head. It almost killed him, and then the madness began. First, there were screams and then the guards. All the guards tried to cover Charlotte and her son. Laurie tried to explain that they shouldn't scream, but before he could say anything to Kels, he saw him running away. Daelin gave chase to catch up with him. She knew where this was going, and she was afraid of it. Soon they were in a dense forest. She did not even think that it was dangerous. Her only thought was to keep Kels safe. Charlotte and her son had security guards, so she didn't have to worry about them. Daelin realized that the boy had simply disappeared from her sight. When the guards tried to drag her out of the woods, she screamed. They frightened the boy, putting everyone in danger. If Kels had simply caught the criminal, There would have been no reason to stop him, but after he kills him, the same beast will be awakened. He's crazy for blood and will kill everyone, friend or foe. He could not be allowed to kill Charlotte's guards. Suddenly, there was screaming behind them. She was sure that everyone had seen the blood on the trees. And then the hand of the criminal appeared from behind the bushes and disappeared without a trace. Daelin immediately understood and was prepared for the worst. She asked the guards to leave, for if they did not, they might die. Daelin clutched her whistle in her hands, just in case. She heard Lauren's voice behind her. The man asked her anxiously to blow the whistle. She ignored him and ran away. Of course, he thought of whistling, but he was a human being. It was then that she saw Kolsa, who was furious. To be honest, she didn't care what happened to her. She flew at him, trying to stop him. Everyone was holding their breath for the moment. When she hit him with her head, everyone was watching. But Daelin was brave. She squeezed the animal tightly and began to soothe it. Their meditations could not be in vain. Lauren kept shouting at the girl to blow the whistle. He was convinced that she would die in a few seconds if she did not. But Daelin didn't care. She wasn't going to blow the whistle. He tried to calm Kels down without shouting or screaming. It was as if she had shut him out of the world. It took him a while to realize what was happening. Daelin used her divine power to reach him. She was not afraid of death. She was afraid he would kill someone else. Kels saw no one and nothing but blood and death. He was going to kill everyone so that it would finally be over. His task was to kill, to destroy, to prevent them from reappearing. He saw an alien, which means that he had to destroy the alien. It was as if he could hear Daelin's voice, but he could not listen to it. Everyone watched the two with fear. The guards were not even going to intervene or raise their weapons. Kels continued to be hysterical, wanting to kill everyone. But this voice calling out to him so desperately, he heard its warm breath and soft voice. Daelin finally heard the beating of a heart. In the midst of all the apocalypse of thought, she was glad she had been able to stop the attack. Realizing that the boy was uncomfortable, she began to slowly lower herself to the ground. But Kels needed more voice and breath. This incident could have led to the death of many. The guards were frightened, but they protected Charlotte. The Empress herself was delighted with how brave Daelin was. Charlotte was often assassinated, so she was used to it, and she admired the girl's courage and recklessness more. She simply went to her death, ready to die. Of course, Daelin's image was important, but she had no strength to stand. The Empress was planning to do something to help, but she was really exhausted, and she just wanted to rest. To switch gears, the girl approached the prince. The boy shouted, "Kels's performance was very cool." Sebian was so enthralled by this beast, as if it were a real theater. Daelin thought, "That's unusual. Maybe he has bad eyesight." Charlotte explained to her son that there was a lot of work to be done. Everyone was skeptical, but Kels seemed to be stable today. Perhaps he has a chance to really become an aristocrat. The girl was going to do everything she could to make him one. Just then, Charlotte held out her hand. The light it emitted was so warm and pleasant. At first, because she was tired, Daelin did not understand what Charlotte wanted. Then she quickly wiped her hand and held it out in return. She was honored by the handshake. In this way, Charlotte confirmed her expectations. Daelin was surprised that the Empress did not touch her hand in a splashy manner. The next moment, all thoughts seemed to disappear. She felt that her body was filled with divine power. Charlotte was a very nice woman. Before she left, she wished Daelin good luck and promised to believe in her. Sebian also wished her a good day, and they got into the carriage. It was incredible that Charlotte had divine power. In fact, she was more mysterious than she seemed. Still, Daelin was glad to have someone to help her get some rest. For better or worse, it was still very nice. Her radiant smile was the last thing she remembered. In any case, her power is the work of the imperial family. She wished Charlotte and her son a safe journey, and then she sighed heavily with fatigue. Charlotte was the Empress, who had shown interest in a member of the 8th Squad. She felt like a puppet in someone's story. By the way, how is Kels? He must be scared. Surprisingly, he was very calm and under control. He seemed to be sleeping standing up. The girl did her best to calm him down in the forest. She poured out a great deal of divine power upon him. The endless day was about to come to an end. So she took the boy's hand and went to the mansion. They would certainly have to take a shower, but first, they would rest and talk. Daelin went out the door, knowing Lauren was waiting for her. The guy seemed pretty pissed off. Daelin risked her life by not using the whistle. He also said they could have been in a lot of trouble. Charlotte and the prince are important people. God forbid they should be killed. Daelin explained that to raise a person, you have to treat them like a person. Daelin tried to convince Lauren that she was confident in her strength. One way or another, he had no choice but to trust the girl, but he asked her to be more careful next time. He also told her that if she needed anything, She could always call him. Walking down the white hallway, Lauren thought, maybe Kels was doing a good job as a fighter. There must be people like that in society. Maybe he's one of them. Meanwhile, the girl was trying to make herself look alive. She was completely exhausted. She looked at the boy and asked him if he was all right. After a short answer, she called him to take a bath. His calm demeanor was annoying, as if it happened every day. He had a new mission to complete, and he had to go wash. Kels said he could wash himself, so the girl left him. She quickly slipped out of the bathroom and ran to her room. The news made her smile because she could finally rest. Meanwhile, the man began to take off his dirty clothes. His hands were bloody, and he had to wash them thoroughly. Suddenly, the boy's eyes fell on the soap. It looked very nice and neat, so he picked it up. It was very slippery and fragile to the touch. Kels thought it was very disgusting. It smelled too mild, too warm, too uncomfortable and unfamiliar. The man wondered why he needed the taste of food, why he needed smells in war. From time to time, he remembered that Daelin had asked him what he liked. He didn't like anything, though the bedside table was nice. The sound of water coming out of the tap is horrible. Kels was annoyed by all the sounds. He just wanted to turn them off. There was probably no sound in the world that he didn't want to get rid of. After a few minutes, though, the water was less annoying. He took the water in his hands and rinsed his head from the blood. He remembered asking the girl to laugh again. Fortunately, the warm water did not allow him to be absorbed in his memories. There was only one small thing. He still wanted more of her laughter and more of her warmth. Without putting on a robe or anything else, he ran away. The only sound he wanted to hear, the only melody that did not irritate him, while the Daelins were relaxing in the warm water, someone ran straight into the room. She finally felt like a human being after all this time here. As she sat in the tub, she wondered if Kels was one of a kind. I mean, were there other men who were trained after the war? Kels is pretty diligent, so they probably have the best chance. I don't know why she's worried about them. It's their concern, not hers. She wanted to continue thinking about her future, but the door interrupted her. Well, not the door, but the person behind it. Damn it, he must have really gone mad in this room. The girl didn't even know how to react. It was on the verge of madness. After she realized where they were, she threw a barrel at him. She shouted, "Close your eyes now!" The blow was slow, but Kels missed it. Daelin really didn't understand what he was doing there. Everything was thick with steam, but it allowed them to see each other's faces. Kels had even forgotten why he had come here. Daelin realized that she probably shouldn't yell. It would only annoy him more. She shouted, "In case you're wondering, I'm not okay, because you have to knock on the door." The man continued to stare at her, and Daelin realized that he was very difficult. The boy approached slowly and said, "Far away, I like him close." It was the first time he had ever said he liked something without being asked. Incredible progress. He is like a real dog that needed a treat. But he's not a dog. He's a human being, and we should have thrown him out. What the hell is he doing barging into the bathroom without knocking? Daelin said, "You walk to the door, close it, and run away." She gently asked him to leave, and he seemed to understand. It was very embarrassing to look at him like that. Fortunately, he understood and quickly went away and closed the door behind him. Unfortunately, today's spa treatments are canceled, and there will be no relaxation. Kels seems to have become more stable, if he can tolerate the heartbeat. After a while, they finally met again. Daelin was glad that Kels was calm enough to concentrate. To be honest, she had never seen anything like it. Well, his body was too beautiful, an architectural monument. Such strong muscles and a great appearance, but I should have concentrated, because now is not the time to look at his muscles. Daelin asked, "Did you take a good bath?" Obviously, this question was not a mere question. Looking at his dirty cheek, she realized that he hadn't been very diligent. Then she looked at his body and realized that he had dirt everywhere. It looks like he just got into the tub and soaked himself. If he washes himself every time, it's a disaster. How were they taught in that war that a man can't even wash himself? Although apparently, this skill was not very useful to them during the war. But why should Daelin be the one to deal with all this? She asked him to wrap a towel around his waist and follow her. It was scary to turn his head back, but still, she wanted to erase only one memory from her memory, but she could not. Kels said that the walking was unbalanced, and he thought it was a wound or an illness. Soon they reached the bathroom. There was very little water. The towel was dry. Now I can see why it was so dirty. The girl found a new tub of water. She decided to explain how the temperature is regulated and how to use the taps. Now it was important to find out what temperature was pleasant for Konya. The boy sat down in the water hesitantly. He certainly didn't seem to like it. Daelin watched him for a few seconds to see how he felt. The boy was angry. Maybe the water was too cold or too hot. But Kels didn't answer, just said he didn't like it. Even though it seemed like the water temperature was perfect, he still didn't like it. He said his senses were dulling. He would not be able to prepare for an attack if necessary. Well, it became clear that he was simply not used to sleeping on a bed. Daelin explained that this feeling was called relaxation. He was stressed on the battlefield, and it was difficult to teach him something pleasant. Now it was time to wipe off all the dirt. First, the girl explained how to wash the head. I had to close my eyes to prevent the foam from getting into my eyes and stinging. Then he had to wash his body, but he was too tense. He seemed to hate this task, but it was easy to explain it to him. Daelin did everything in her power to make him feel more comfortable. After a few minutes, he got used to it and felt better. In any case, his face still looked incredible. Even though he is a soldier, he is simply perfect. Their bathing routine continued, the girl trying to be light. At last, she felt that her efforts had not been in vain. Of course, a few times it was necessary to use force. Anyway, Kels is just in the process of adapting. Looking at his hands, it became clear that they needed to be washed. Daelin said, "If you don't want to be washed by others, you have to learn how to do it yourself." After all the procedures, she asked him to rinse off the foam and put on a robe. To make him a human being, he had to be treated like one. There is still a lot of work to be done, but it is not so difficult now. Daelin emphasized again that she had to wear a gown. Then they agreed to meet in the kitchen in a few minutes. The boy slowly looked at the girl as if he were sad. After a while they met. The girl was glad to see that the boy had finally regained his human form. Now he had a new mission to choose a room to sleep in. When the girl saw the room the boy had chosen, she was astonished. He had always asked for a white room without any unnecessary irritants. Daelin asked, "Do you really want to sleep here?" Apparently, Kels was not sure of his decision. The room was right next to Daelin's. The guy said he didn't care about the noise and it wouldn't bother him. He didn't sound very credible, but I wanted to believe him. Aren't there enough rooms in this mansion for Kels to sleep in? It was too early to sleep, and they decided to start searching again. A neat and luxurious room, to be honest. They were all different, but they were better than an interrogation room or a prison. Kels himself could not decide on a room. They were all different, but he decided to spend the evening in the nuclear pink room. Daelin couldn't think of anything to do, so she just went to bed. She hoped it wouldn't be her last night. During the night, the boy could not sleep. The noise continued to abuse his nervous system. He could hear every sound that Daelin made. That girl really caused too much discomfort. Although it has gotten much easier over time, it is not a critical noise. Eventually, the boy was able to sleep. Their morning began with a shower, and the girl was very happy. Kels had a nice bath and looked better than usual. I should have taught him how to dry himself properly, because I didn't have time to do it yesterday. He smelled incredible. In a little while, he will become a real nobleman. All I had to do was find some nice clothes, and I could go to the reception. There didn't seem to be any big problems with manners either. There was no limit to her joy, and Daelin saw tremendous progress. It was time to dry off quickly and run to breakfast. A girl explaining how to behave when a hairdryer blows in your face. Later, she mentioned that Kels didn't like to close his eyes. Daelin said he could leave them open, but Kels closed them. Closed eyes were the basis of his use. Squad had to die. Kels knew that, but he didn't follow the rules. He was even afraid to sleep, so he kept his eyes open. The main task was not to die. The eyes helped to concentrate. His life went on in this way, but something changed. Daelin used to say that you can keep your eyes open if you know how to act. She also complimented him on his hair, which was very thick indeed. Meanwhile, Kels was thinking about how hard it was for him to keep his eyes closed, but the longer he heard the voice, the calmer he felt. The girl was going to teach him how to dry his hair. Suddenly, she took off and ran away. She fussed for a few minutes in the table, looking for something on the shelves. The man looked rather alarmed, for was there danger again? But fortunately, everything was all right. As it turned out, she had found a mirror and wanted to show it to Kels. The boy had never looked at himself in a mirror before. To tell the truth, he looked at the reflection with caution. The mirror looked safe, and the reflection in general. Daelin said that someday this face would be appreciated. She didn't know what his parents looked like, but they were very handsome. By the way, the Teach detachment was trained from childhood. Did their parents send them there? How many others like Kels are left? They were all ordinary people. You just treated them differently. But there was nothing Daelin could do, even if she knew the truth. On an almost empty street, a boy lay beaten. Lauren stood behind him, along with several of his assistants. He had an evil smile on his face. The beast he had seen was probably a member of UNIT. Meanwhile, the Kelso mansion was quiet and peaceful. They dressed neatly and prepared themselves for the role of aristocracy. Daelin gasped when she saw how handsome he was. The man looked like a Greek god. It was incredible. The power he exuded was even stronger. Kels was worried that Daelin had been hurt because she had screamed. She said, "You're crazy handsome," but it was hard to understand. To Kels, the word crazy was an insult that didn't go with a compliment. Their training was going well, even better than expected. She was still adjusting some details to make it look perfect. It was nothing, but she liked it well enough. Kels decided to walk around the room again, and again it was gorgeous. If they said he was a lost king, they'd probably believe it. Daelin liked to think he'd been just as cute as a child. People around him must have said he wasn't cut out for war. Still, it was interesting to know how he got into the treachery. As it turns out, Kels doesn't even know it. Well, if we can't get the information, let him rest. Kels said he had no memories before he joined the army. He does not remember how many years he was trained. I also don't remember his name or how long he spent. He was called Kels from the very beginning, but there were some people he remembered. Perhaps he was under a spell that made him forget everything. In any case, he had to check something. With the help of divine power, one could try to bring back the memory. It was none of Daelin's business, but she wanted to try. How powerful a spell would have to be to erase a lifetime? As the divine power began to work, she felt something. It looked like a pentagram. Very confusing symbols. This spell is obviously very old, and we should look it up in books. Until it is possible to unravel it, we should leave it as it is. Kels said that he felt divine power. They were to be taught a lesson in etiquette. Daelin. They laughed because no one liked to learn, but she forgot that Kels was special, so he agreed to anything. Well, tomorrow was the day to start studying. Actually, at first, Daelin thought he was a dumb jock, but Kels is pretty smart, good-looking, and quick-witted. She even joked that she would make him cry if he didn't smile. I should have taught Kels a few more little things, like how to choose his clothes and how to put on his shoes. Daelin decided to tell him about her first debut. When her brother made his debut in a suit, she thought she would have a dress, but her parents dressed her as an old lady in an old dress. To be honest, that dress made her look 20 years older. Fortunately, all this misfortune is over, and things are much better now. Daelin wanted to teach her boyfriend how to dress, that he hadn't been in this situation. She knows that bullying is the worst thing about debut. She wanted to earn his trust. She'd make it easier to learn. Suddenly, the boy stopped and the girl became excited. She repeated his name several times, but there was no response. Kels finally nodded his head and said he understood. Why did he look so strange now? Well, anyway, there were many plans, and we shouldn't sit still. Daelin walked forward. She had no idea what Kels was thinking. She also said that the boy would make the girls cry. He really was insanely handsome. Society would be crazy. They sat down together to write calligraphy in words. Daelin cried out, "This is just bloody impossible!" Kels, as it turned out, had written all the letters perfectly. It was the first time he had seen them, but his handwriting was just perfect. How can a man who has never seen letters write so well? It seemed to take longer to get the result, but here it is. Daelin explained how to hold the pen before we started. She gently unwrapped Kels's hands, and then she began to explain the letters, what they sounded like, and how to spell them. As it turned out, this was not a problem at all, for Konyea knew everything. Okay, this guy can be sent to Harvard to study. The girl asked him to write a few more words. He coped with all the tasks perfectly. Now they began to read and began with a few words. Daelin wondered about the signature, since his handwriting was so good. Actually, Daelin's signature is typed. She just learned to write recently. She is embarrassed to remember her first signature on her debut. Oh, wait. People who come up with captions also make a lot of money. It could be a great income in your old age. The girl wanted a signature, so she thought of asking Kels. But wouldn't that be an abuse of her position? No matter the rule, if he was her client, she could help him. She asked him to help in her sweetest and most enthusiastic voice. After a while, she looked sadly at the paper. It seems the idea of a signature has failed miserably. Daelin gently hinted that this was not what she had expected. Kels obviously doesn't understand what's going on, because he was really trying. He was determined to write the best signature he could for Daelin, at the cost of his own life. He imagined that the letter was a battlefield. Suddenly, the letters began to be considered as other dead people. He must have gone mad. At least that explains it. Kels saw his grandfather and began to beat his head against the table because he had lost. This job is turning into a nightmare. The next few days passed in silence, which was good. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere in a godforsaken forest, it was very peaceful. Water, food, and new clothes were all that one could dream of. Daelin thought it was heaven on earth. Every morning when she woke up, Kels was waiting for her, clean and dressed. Every meal was his masterpiece. In his spare time, the boy cleans up the mansion. That is why there is no dust in the mansion. At first, Daelin thought this job was a trip to hell. It was a terrible journey, but the closer to the end, the better. Now, I just need to teach this boy some manners. The days were getting much longer. and it was summer and quite warm. Daelin had taught him to read, so he had found a new hobby. This time she decided to learn to bake. It's the one thing Kels is really bad at. Desserts are a great way to teach him something new. It helps that he already knows a lot and can speak fluently. The girl knocked on the pink Barbie room and asked if she could come in. When she received permission, she slowly opened the door and went inside. He was serious but irresistible at the same time. He looked even more handsome in the book. At last, he looked like a human being. Daelin was proud of the work she had done. She had really done it. Suddenly, something caught her eye. The boy stood anxiously by the window, his arms tense. His face showed that he was very angry. He has just been made a man, and now he is going to turn into a dog again? Daelin slowly hugged him from behind, trying to calm him down. He usually calms down quickly when he feels Daelin's touch, but this time his plan didn't work. He was still very tense. It seems that something very serious has happened. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A very loud knock. The strangers waiting outside the door seemed to be in desperate need of help. The girl did not know how to react, because no one was expected to visit. Lauren promised her that she would always be warned before a visit. Besides, she hadn't seen anyone on the road, so who could have sneaked in so quickly? She should have checked the door to see if it was someone she knew. Daelin, the boys asked her to calm down and follow the rules. To open the door, you need to ask who it is and decide by their voice. Kels, he was very serious, but he listened to the girl. No one had been in the house lately, not even Lauren. If it was really a danger, should she bring Kelso along? It might hurt him, but it's their lives that are at stake, isn't it? She had worked so hard to make him human. Daelin told the boy to wait here, and she would come to the door herself. She assured Kels that she had an idea. She's a war priestess after all, and she has magic in her hands. She could burn everyone alive with one fell swoop. The guard didn't give any signals, so it must be clear. But perhaps the guard was killed long ago, so they are silent. Daelin asked who was there, and she heard Lauren's voice outside the door. She opened the door, and the man explained that he was very sorry for the unexpected visit. They had an emergency, so they came here. Daelin had been so relaxed lately that she had forgotten there was danger in the world. Her gaze slowly moved to what looked like a prisoner. Kels was definitely not happy with the new character. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't like it! I don't like it!" Lauren was shocked at their progress, but not for long. He tried to explain that it would only be for a short time. But Kels didn't like the idea at all and was furious. The girl didn't know who they were seeing, but judging by her reaction, it might have been someone she knew. The soldiers were desperate for support, and we should have let them in. Daelin was calming the beast, and Loren was shocked to hear them talking. She asked the guard to quickly bring the stranger into the room. She realized how angry Kels was, so she tried to calm him down. All she wanted was for no one to ask her for anything else. Judging by the fact that a stranger had been brought in, the situation was critical. Daelin felt like the owner of an obedient dog. Lauren asked her for something, but sitting on her throne, Daelin refused. The boy was trying to settle a conflict, probably something really serious. Lauren asked her to think about it some more, to change her mind. It's such a beautiful day outside. The weather is so beautiful. Kelso is being good today, and his hair is softer. As it turns out, the false prisoner was a member of the Third. Lauren asked the girl to take on another beast. It is obvious why the answer was no. It is still a lot of work. According to his history, he's killed a lot of priests, and Kels doesn't like him. Lauren explained that there was no one else to do the job. If Daryl doesn't take the case, they'll kill him. There was no other way out. He was a walking disaster. The girl tried to shift the responsibility from herself. Why? When everything has just gotten better, do we have to bring up the problem again? Lauren continued to persuade the girl, arguing that they were in the same group. Moreover, her job was not to teach, but simply to control. While the good side fought in her head, he didn't have to die. Anglo said he felt sorry for the boy. He was just like Kels. The main argument entered the village, doubling the payment. The girl hesitated for a long time. It was twice as much work. It was then that Loren promised to quadruple the compulsory expenses and add a bonus. And then the priestess stepped in, ready to help all people. Loman finally succeeded in persuading her, and he was very happy. As soon as she agreed to this, she immediately regretted it. Daelin knew that money could really save her, but paying for it with such hard labor was unbearable. Well, they decided to meet him at least. The boy had to be accustomed to new people and society. They convinced Daelin that he had been sleeping, so he was unmovable. Kels said the beast had long since come to himself. Well, it turns out the sleeping pills aren't that effective. We couldn't let him hurt anyone. Konyea attacked the boy, whose name was Halt. Keys didn't like him very much because he was always loud. It seems that all the members of the TH squad were hypersensitive, but Halt had a serious problem with aggression. He didn't look like a vegetable. Unlike Kels, a fight broke out between them, and we had to stop it. Halt had spent a lot of time with Kels, so he knew his weaknesses. But he did not know one very important factor. Kels was no longer a beast. He was trying to become an aristocrat. Daelin watched them argue, but she did not know what to do. Should she stop them? In any case, she was holding the whistle for Halt. She remembered what Laurent had said. He had always warned her. Perhaps the new member of their family was not as evil as he seemed. Although from the way they were fighting, they looked like two mad dogs. Something had to be done, or wait until it was over. As long as the people outside were safe, we could rest. Kels beat Halt until he was silent. Daelin asked him how he was feeling, and if he was okay. Has he turned into a mad dog again? Luckily, he was fine. He just picked Halt up. Kels defeated him, but he wanted to lock him up so he wouldn't hurt anyone. They used to be friends, but it turned out they had to tolerate each other because of the order. It is not known whether they will fight again, depending on Halt. We had to find a way to stop him. Halt is a master of surprise attack, a skilled killer, and very stubborn. Kels had enough strength to keep his dust at bay. If the wire tries to attack again, the only way out is to kill him. Daelin agreed to take him just to reduce the deaths. And now she has a man before her whom she can kill with her own hands. Daelin asked Kels to be as gentle as possible, to find the softest possible thread to tie him up with, and then untie it as gently as possible. While they were working on this plan, it seems that the red-headed friend woke up. They began to play a new game, popularly called Kvacha. Halt seems to have lost this round. When he was finally tied up, it was time to feed him. Halt said, "You taught the damned boy to cook? This is delicious." The girl was very surprised to learn that he could taste food. Kels never said he could taste her. As it turned out, he could taste food too, but he didn't care about it. She thought that if he wasn't enjoying the food, he couldn't taste it. Daelin asked, "Halt, do you hear a heartbeat or bird song?" As it turned out, he heard everything, all his life. Halt did not care much for these sounds. He was content to live. Daelin was surprised when Halt said, "I hadn't thought of that." It was hard to imagine that these mad dogs could think. One way or another, she had to get along with him. Halt seemed to like her because of her simplicity and her jokes. To be honest, sitting in the ropes was not very comfortable to eat, but the girl was not going to release him. At least not yet. Halt obviously had better social skills and spoke better. The boy asked to be dismissed, but the girl refused again. Daelin explained that she was surprised at the difference with Kels. As it turned out, Halt had joined the troop later than the others, so he knows more about the world than the other dogs and has undergone fewer procedures. Remembering Loren's words, no one knew what these procedures were. It is a federal secret, known only to the priests. Perhaps we can find out some information about these spells. If Loren has given absolutely no information about the spell, it was worth trying to talk to that red-haired dog, but unfortunately, as it turned out, he knew nothing either. The only thing that was known was that these spells were used to increase sensitivity. At first, Halt tried not to use it, because it was unbearable. They were given orders that could not be disobeyed. Usually, the so-called leaders killed those who were weaker. Those who were spared were simply erased from memory and thrown away. Obviously, someone was very good at magic. Halt said a lot of useful things, though the spell did not help. Kels. He was annoyed all the time, but he got used to it. I should have waited until someone else was appointed. It was a pathetic sight. Two guys fighting over her. Well, they were literally fighting over her. They looked like men, but they were really children. But how did things come to such a critical point? Going back a few days will help us understand. When Halt was untied, he finally felt human. He was ashamed to admit it, but Kels was a really good cook. Halt even thought the dog had lived in the mansion before the war. I didn't forget to mention his beauty and manners, and his damn straight posture. Daelin asked, "Do you remember when you joined the squad?" It turned out that yes, Kels had been brought to you with his memory wiped. How do dogs look at another dog and realize that they've had their memory wiped? Halt said, "It looked strange. They made him an idiot. Has he forgotten everything? How to speak, sleep, eat, and live?" The only thing Kels knew how to do was to kill without mercy. There were others who went insane and had their memories erased, but not Kels. Daelin asked, "If you wipe your memory that often, won't there be a problem?" If it was more than 5 or 6 times, the dogs became disabled. In any case, many died on that battlefield. Daelin was surprised to hear Halt speak so indifferently about the deaths of his friends. The dog thought that there was no friendship there, that everyone would betray under orders. For a moment, it seemed as if faith in humanity had been lost, even if children with perfect qualifications went mad there. It was strange to hear Halt say this in such a calm tone. The dog continued, "He came not knowing anything, thinking he would die first. In the reflection, I could see his smile, evil and unnatural. It was not a good thing, was it? Daelin was visibly tense, and Kels seemed to be tense as well. She took his arm to stop him from attacking. They should have stopped looking at each other stupidly. Daelin said, "You're supposed to be friends, cool it." Halt could not control his anger. Kels was annoying him. He said that he hated people like Kels, that he was a son of a bitch. If there was no such thing in the squad, why was the anger directed only at Kels? At this point, I had the great idea to isolate them. Halt continued to be very nervous. He seemed to have finally realized the cause of his suffering. He cried out, "The eyes, nose, and mouth of this bastard humiliate me." Suddenly, Kels stood in front of Daelin and said, "Back off!" Oh my god, are they going to start fighting again? Don't say that. Daelin looked from one dog to the other. We couldn't let them start fighting, or they'd go out the window. Halt attacked first. Anger really not his strong suit. Daelin tried to calm Kels with divine power. To be honest, this confused both dogs. Then I heard a dull thud. Someone was hit. Something seemed to have happened, but Daelin was afraid to look up. It seems to have happened out of the blue, because nothing happened. The man stood like a solid rock, protecting Daelin. When he returned, there was a large bruise on his cheek. To be honest, I had mixed feelings about this. If Kels was hit, first of all, it hurt him. And secondly, why didn't he address it? Frankly, everyone in this room was surprised by his reaction. Halt was expecting a battle, expecting new emotions and experiences. Daelin was glad that Kels had been able to keep his composure. Now it was her turn to do her part. She started to walk slowly forward, but the dog didn't seem to like it. Daelin took Halt's hand to impart the divine power. It was the only way to make him calm down. She turned on the good priestess again and began to speak. Immediately, he felt shivers, a new sensation for Halt. It helped that he had some social skills. In general, quite a few different people come to the temple. Among them, % are genuine clients. But which ones are real? The real ones are people who have gone mad, and it is useless to talk to them. Daelin invented her own way of talking to such people. They need to be stifled by their enthusiasm. She looked like a rabid cheerleader. It was strange. It seemed as if her eyes were on fire from the power she was radiating. It was going to work one way or another. It always does. Daelin spoke for willpower, that Halt's life was in his hands. Well, she spent quite a bit of energy calming him down. Finally, she let him go and let him experience it for himself. Halt was surprised, and at first he did not understand what was happening. After so many experiences in the war, this is very strange, but this feeling was something new, a calmness that had not been there before. Halt had finally experienced the benefits of divine power. He was extremely happy, for he had never felt better in all his years. The dog had been suffering from phantom pains, but now they were gone. Daelin was pleased with her work, as she had always done. Kels worked on a similar principle, a little divine power, and it was done. Before she could finish, however, she felt someone grab her around the waist. "Kalsa!" He looked very stern, even angry. It was understandable. Someone was trying to take away his salvation. Daelin had become a symbol of freedom, and now two dogs were fighting over her. They had to be calmed again, and again by divine power. Her sweet smile made them forget their quarrel. Daelin saw them as cats. Under the right circumstances, they are quite easy to control. Their progress had to be supported by good food, so she invited them both to dinner. Judging by their reaction, they were finally at peace, but Kalsa looked very upset. The reason was not difficult to guess, but it was still upsetting. This work will never be easy, even when you think it's over. In this manner, the days pass more quickly because of strength. Several days passed in such disorderly chaos. Halt found it difficult to keep his temper. Very difficult indeed. The divine power is no longer able to do its work. A new method had to be devised. Halt is a human being, like everyone else, and he needs to be explained in words. But what if he does not want to listen? Halt! He could even pick at stones, and every little thing irritated him. Konyea was always in an angry mood, and this was causing him to regress. So the conclusion is simple. If you calm down Halt, the others will also be calm. Although I admit that it will be very difficult to calm the redhead. He could be called a madman. Daelin. It didn't take me long to realize it, but dogs see threat and war everywhere. They're perfectly trained fighters. They don't know how to live any other way. Kels is worse off. His senses are still intact. He can hear Halt's screams. In his place, anyone would have gone mad. Kels has started to act like a child. It's his defense mechanism. He didn't even smell like an independent person. How could he become an aristocrat? One way or another, I had to calm Halt down again. Daelin decided to be sickeningly nice until he got tired of it. Suddenly, they both went to the window. Their senses were heightened when they realized that someone had come. They could not see who it was through the window, which made it even worse. Kels suddenly saw what had saved their lives. Grabbing the dais, they fell to the floor together. An arrow, and a metal arrow at that, as if someone had gone hunting. Wait, a threat and an uncontrolled dog in the same mansion. This will end badly? I had to catch up with him. Kels didn't like the idea, but he knew where this was going. Daelin screamed, demanding that he go after him. Luckily, her cries were heard. Kels grabbed her and threw her over his shoulder, and then they walked to the window together. It was unexpected, but apparently very effective. She'd never get used to it, although it didn't matter if they were on horseback or on foot, as long as they were fast. Daelin resigned herself to her constant involvement in the problems. She tried to imagine herself as a sack and stay calm. She was also encouraged by the thought that Kels was in control. Suddenly, they both heard screaming, very loud screaming. Halt! Luckily, he hadn't gone over the fence, so he was under control. But the screams of those in the forest were heartbreaking. This time, the divine power may not help. This time, the idea of using a whistle is quite good. But it seems to fly away into a secret black box. Daelin forgot her whistle. Mission failed. And what do you do in a god-forsaken forest with a crazy dog? Since there was no reason to use it, she left it behind. Why does everything go wrong at the most necessary moment? This time, everything is getting out of control. It's unbearable. Should I ask Kels to come back and get the whistle? Well, at least that's some idea of how to save the world. Kels visibly tensed. His shoulders slumped. The last thing he needed was to get off his leash. After a few steps, they saw a lot of blood, and the culprit himself. Halt was like a man possessed, his eyes burning with death. His skill was impressive, and his strength was even more so. Such things are difficult to imagine, and impossible to see. Halt fought with his bare hands against the sword, so he was greatly injured. The idea came to me to just drop everything and run away, but Daelin couldn't. It was her duty now. Kels wanted to pounce to prevent more deaths, but Daelin had a better idea, and she had a plan. Concentration helped to summon much divine power. She summoned fire, and then she directed it at the enemies. At least it was a quick way to calm the dog. Daelin was exhausted. It had been a long time since she had done something like this. It was a method she had used on the battlefield when she had nothing left. The arrow she saw was definitely meant for her. Someone tried to kill her, but fortunately, it is over. Wait, what about Halt? He was trembling. His arms, legs, and shoulders were convulsing. Kels wanted to pounce on him, but Daelin stopped him just in time. It would have been convenient if both dogs could have been calmed by a hug. What's the matter with this Halt? He's so out of control. He seemed to be angry, but it was a different emotion. He did not answer any questions. He just stood there trembling. He managed to go through the war in his right mind. He fought in a more conscious state. A man who has lived through this will take care of himself because he knows this fear. If someone is afraid, even simple things will seem deadly. Halt was afraid because he was very afraid. Daelin ran up to him and hugged him, not knowing if it would work. She kept telling him that there was no one, no threat. There is no need to fight anymore. It is safe here now. She pointed at the dead and explained that everything was over. Halt slowly began to recover, a curious state. It was good to hear him speak human language at last. But suddenly, something happened that no one expected. The boy began to cry like no other child in the world. This really confused everyone. Kels lost his mind when he saw the picture. We had to calm him down as quickly as possible. The hugging and cuddling was working. We had to keep it up. Suddenly, she felt someone grab her arm. Kels held her tightly, and she was his now. He said, "I don't like it." Kels tightened his grip on her throat, and she could not breathe. They tried to calm him down, but failed. Kels loosened his grip when he realized that the girl could not breathe. Halt looked like a miserable dog, broken and alone. Daelin tried to think of a plan to end the play, but it seemed that all attempts would be in vain. After a few seconds, a new wave of screams and tears began. In books, a beautiful woman is embraced by two strong men. Many women dream of this, but not Daelin. In the evening, Lauren came to see them and said he was taking Halt away. She was thanked for her care of the dog. As it turned out, they found a new priest for him, so things were getting better. Lauren asked, "How was your time together? Was everything okay?" Daelin found it difficult to answer this question, so she remained silent. Lauren noticed that the dog was much calmer. Despite her pleas not to tie him up like that, he continued to do so. The girl asked them to return the whistle, so they did. A few hours before, the girl had decided to talk to Halt. He was obviously ashamed of himself for crying so much. He tried to explain that he was feeling better, that the power was working. It used to be worse. He used to go crazy and run away, but now he had a feeling in his body that he could concentrate. Halt told me that he had a clear head and seemed to be thinking soberly. He even joked that he could restrain himself if provoked. Halt had always slept only 3 hours, but here he was able to sleep more. Kels explained that the redhead's mission was to be always on the alert. They began to quarrel again because Kels had answered for Halt. Suddenly, they were both calm. So suddenly, Halt said, "You are not a bastard. Why are you doing this? Oh my god, has someone got a conscience?" It was hard to tell whether this was progress or regression. Daelin offered to help the boy fall asleep. I also explained that sleep is an important part of our lives. She pumped the boy with divine power. It was a pity that he would not even be able to say goodbye to them. For some reason, deep down, this decision seemed wrong. Perhaps during these few days, they had become very attached to Halt. Everything looked very suspicious. The unexpected visit and the nights. Daelin and Kels slowly returned to the manor. Lauren said, "I've brought Halt back, as you commanded." He stood in an unknown office. The man he worked for praised his work. The stranger said, "I wish he had destroyed everything, lucky girl." Lauren was ordered not to send any more knights. They thought about the plan, but the target was unknown. A stranger said, "We have not met in person, but she is close." Obviously, they were talking about Daelin. The stranger picked Loren up off the floor. The man said it was an honor to serve her.